I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, I'll start with introductions to my right, but Dan Poisson does have an excused absence for this evening.
Brian Belknap, Ward 4.
Clarissa Perez Armendariz, Ward 1.
Pam Hart, Ward 2.
Karen Matthew, Ward 3.
Connie Brown, Superintendent.
Pat Gaudier at large.
Pamela Albert at large.
Jason Levesque, Mayor.
Abigail Fauché, Student Representative.
Gabriel Desfordel, Student Representative.
Mark Conrad, Business Manager.
Sue Doris, Assistant Superintendent.
And our third student rep, Jillian Dumay, also has an excused absence for this evening. All right, let's begin the evening with a motion for approval of tonight's agenda, which also includes the minutes from February 15th, as well as the recommended contract renewal for Eric Gray, principal of Washburn Elementary School. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Pam. Can I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Brian. Questions, comments? Seeing none, I'll take a vote. All those in favor? Motion passes. Thank you. All right, let's open this up for public participation. Do we have anyone from the general public? Oh, sorry, Eric. I go right through it, just sort of like, congratulations, Eric. Sorry. My apologies. All right, moving on. Public participation. Do we have anyone from the general public who would like to come address the school committee this evening? All right, seeing none. Budget presentation. The bulk of the evening will be spent on budget presentation. So this is the first peek that we get into the 23-24 school department operating budget. So with that being said, Dr. Brown, I will take it away.
Thank you very much, Chairperson Matthew. Thank you, Dave, who is the behind-the-scenes gentleman. There it is, now on both screens. So to cue this up, to remind the school committee that the next 6 weeks are really heavy in terms of budget presentations. And we have reserved all of the presentation time during your meetings for that purpose. The calendar, and I'll go through that in just a minute, will go through the different cost centers and when they'll be presented. We will also give you the dates for the meeting with the City Council, and then when the committee will need to take action on it, and then on to the voters. So just as a reminder, the development of a budget is a year-long process, and while this piece of it is particularly intensive, we, Mark and I and the other staff members, really have budget on our plates all the time. We've always have 3 budgets open at any one given time. So we have the budget that we're in, which is 22-23. We have the budget that we just finished, which was 21-22, because we're still preparing for audit. And then we have the budget for next year, which is 23-24. So at any given time, we have about $150 million open that we are monitoring and taking care of. So this is the superintendent's recommended operating budget for 23-24. It is the superintendent's budget until you folks vote to make it your budget and then send it on to the City Council. And that's generally in April. A couple of things that we continue to do as part of the budget development process that has worked well for us, including after each presentation, and tonight you will hear all of Cost Center 1, there's an opportunity for school committee members to ask questions. We record all the questions that you ask, and then we put the questions and the answers on the budget website. All of the budget documents are also on the budget website, including the budget message. I go to each school and give a budget presentation. We'll start that next week, and that's voluntary. Anybody who wants to come is welcome to do so. And the goal is to make the process as understandable, transparent, and accessible to people as possible. So to get going, so just to sort of set up a couple of things, this is the calendar. Tonight, we will go through the budget books and each cost center. Cost Center 1 is regular education, and so each of the building administrators has a presentation planned. On the 8th, which is a week from tonight, is Cost Center 2, that's special education. Cost Center 4, which is generally athletics. Cost Center 5, student and staff support, and curriculum and instruction. You get a break from budget on the 15th, but not meeting, because on the 15th, we need to have a special committee meeting regarding a personnel matter and 2 potential grievance hearings. So we're back again on the 22nd. We have in reserve the 29th, just in case we need another night. On the 5th will be the school committee's public hearing on the budget. That generally precedes a regular school committee meeting. That's not a standalone night. So May 1st is the city council budget review on the 3rd, and that's a meeting that is a joint meeting between the city council and the school committee. We come back on the 3rd where you actually approve the budget. At this point, it becomes yours. We go back to the city council on the 15th, and then we go to the voters in Auburn at a budget validation referendum, or BVR, on the 13th. And as an aside, there will be 2 questions on that ballot. One will be the BVR, the budget validation referendum for the 23-24 budget, and citizens are asked if they approve it or not. And then the second question pertains to a referendum question for Edward Little High School. We have asked for additional funds from the Maine Department of Education and the State Board. We've received preliminary approval from the State Board Construction Committee, unanimous approval. I go back on the 8th to get their full approval, and then in June, the citizens of Auburn will be asked if they will accept that state money. That's entirely state-funded, and it needs to be voted on here in Auburn. So continuing, part of my goals always include being transparent, goal-focused, inclusive. I talked a little bit about that at the beginning. I told you that we would have individual school presentations tonight, talked a little bit about the website and Q&A, and I do want to spend just a minute or two orienting you to your budgets and the binders. Here I will really give away my love for paper, because this is a binder and it's organized by sections, and once you get the hang of it, it's really quite easy to understand. And we've been helped over the years by feedback from the committee, by council members who have said, we need this information in order to help us understand the budget. So the budget is organized at the beginning by the budget message, and then you will see following the revenue section, we'll talk a little bit about that as we go through, and then you get into the schools. That's all in Cost Center 1, Cost Center 2 is special ed, and then on you go. In every section, you will see all of the people who are assigned to that section. You will see what their costs are in total. And that was a piece of feedback from Brian Carrier years ago. He said, Connie, I really need to be able to easily understand what the costs are in personnel. 80% of our budget relates to personnel costs. And that should be, because we are a people organization, so that follows. But I want to be transparent, and all of that information is included. It is public, there's nothing private. So as you go through the different cost centers, you will find that you get to, as you get closer to the back, things like transportation, facilities and maintenance, and debt. Debt's a big one for us because of the EL project. So we'll talk a little bit about that as we go through. So I'd like to direct your attention to the budget message, and just to give you a sense of, if you need a quick fact sheet, this is the one that I turn to most frequently. And again, this is a product of a suggestion from Mr. Carrier, who was at that time the council representative to the school committee. And he asked if I could write, comparable to what the city manager writes, an overview of the budget. And it is a really good exercise to go through, because it forces me to become very clear in where the costs are, any reductions that they are, and how we end up to where we end up. So under the introduction, I have believed that a budget is always a policy document, and it really should reflect the goals of the school committee and the school department. And so you will see the goals that you adopted, several auspicious goals back in the fall. And as I said in the paragraph here, we have much to celebrate in Auburn. We deliver high-quality, research-based instruction, and our efforts are really paying off for our students. We delivered to you the State of the Schools presentation in January, and there was much to celebrate there. And for example, some of those scores, including our highest poverty scores, have gone up triple digits in terms of their performance. So that's real success here. Our high school graduation rate has jumped. Franklin's at 100%, no pressure, Melissa. I know you're thinking it's hard when you're at 100%. Where do you go? But that's a big step. We're doing great things in the school department here. So the proposed budget, and I talked about that, cost centers is $58,951,552. And you can read through at your leisure where that comes from, what the change is in mill rate. I know that's always a big topic of conversation with the city council. What that means to a homeowner, what that means to someone who has $150,000 taxes. If this passed as is, that would be an increase of just over $96.44. So on page 2, I talk about the total debt service for Edward Little High School. Footnote, that's going up 34.5%. That's significant. Much of that is state funded. The next category talks about local-only debt service. Again, this is money that the citizens in Auburn voted for the new high school. So I think that's important to underscore. Those costs were explained to people. That debt service was clearly enunciated that it would start to hit when Mark and I come in November each year. We go through those debt service calendars with you, and here we are. So that is also up 32.8%. So one of the regrettable things that happened as part of this budget process was that after meetings with the city council and the school committee and a discussion of parameters, I realized that I was not able to bring in what I thought was a reasonable budget without making significant reductions in personnel. And so I have reduced 23.5 positions, and it goes, as you read through the budget memo, you'll realize where those positions are. Most are related to enrollment. Most are vacant, or they are positions that have retirements in them. And as you go through the various sections of the budget, we have delineated where those position reductions are. There's another challenge that we had to overcome, and this is under revenues. It's one thing if you can cut your expenditures. It is equally challenging if you have revenues that do not meet your expenditures. So we get a fairly sizable amount of money from the state of Maine through the general purpose aid. And this year, we are going to see $1,174,902 less than we did in the 22-23 budget. Remember, I said at any one given time, there are always 3 budgets open. So next year, 23-24, the state of Maine is giving us $1,174,902 less. And if you're wondering, well, how come? I'll talk about the enrollment projections in just a minute, and that will become clear to you. And so it also is the increase in Auburn's valuation. So when you look at the inputs in the general purpose aid formula, some of the biggest drivers are enrollment and your valuation of your community, and that drives the mill rate. So I'll let you read through that and just give you a sense that the memo is organized by cost center. And then you get to the end, and the last cost center is Article 11, which are crossing guides. The state of Maine, pursuant to statute, sets out the different cost centers. This is not something that we arbitrarily put together. This is something that all school departments have to follow. Continuing on, so the budget overall is up 5.78%. The mill rate change is up 0.64 cents, going to $9.47, or as I said a minute ago, $96.44 on a home here. So some of the cost drivers, I talked a little bit about EL, the local only debt service. I do want to underscore number 3. So I have projected a 15% increase for health insurance. That's $845,996. Last year, Mark and I can't blame Mark, I underguessed the percentage for health insurance. It's always a gamble. The rates are set in April. That's when we get our final premium, but we have to put a budget together long before that happens. And so we have to guess. And so we get an experience factor usually in November, right, Mark? That's when we get an experience factor. And I guessed too low last year. And so the experience factor came in this year, and I knew that I had to do a better job and guess higher. So this reflects a 15% increase over the current health insurance cost. So just to give you a sense of what that looks like, so our personnel budget is $594,945, even with decreasing 23 and a half positions. That is up $437,000. There are some other cost drivers that I want to bring to your attention. We all have experienced an increase in electrical rates. The school system is not unique in that. So our projected electrical costs are going up $403,000, and of which $271,000 is directly attributable to the new Edward Little High School. So at this point, I'd like to start with the individual school presentations in just a minute. We'll give Michelle a minute to come on up. And while she's making her way to the table, I want to call your attention to enrollment. So Peter Robinson helped me with these charts, and if this is 1920, so this is the year before the pandemic. So look all the way to the bottom, 3540. So that's that one. So then we have 2021, and we're at 3405. And then we have 2122, another sizable drop to 3282. Current year, we're at 3202. And projected for next year is 3153. And the reason this becomes important is for many reasons, but as we look ahead, and Mark and I are not only thinking about the budget year in front of us, we're also thinking about 24-25 and 25-26. And the reality is that with the enrollment projections that we have, the $1 million in change that we saw in decreased general education aid is going to continue. So I really need to get that on your radar, that somehow that is going to have to get made up. And having done this for 25 years, the only way you close those gaps is you either raise it locally, that's one option, or you reduce your expenditures. It's the only way I know how to do that. So Michelle, thank you for coming forward, and East Auburn Community School.
Hi, everyone. So I'm here to share with you a little bit of information about what we're planning for next year for East Auburn. Although our enrollment has been pretty steady over the last few years at East Auburn. Of course, it continues to be your smallest school, and that, of course, presents some challenges. But as we look forward to next year, you'll see that our enrollment there, we do have at 2 grade levels where we are kind of anticipating higher enrollment in 2nd and 4th grade, where we're keeping 2 positions, which we will have to watch very closely, because as enrollment changes and we have students leaving and joining us, we would be looking to make sure that we keep our those positions where they're needed. And in everywhere else, it's 1 teacher per grade level, which can make things pretty tricky at times. Our total enrollment projection for next year is 158 students. What you will notice on this slide right here is that there is an absence of pre-K. So we are anticipating having to transfer our pre-K program over to Washburn School. That is based solely on the number of students that we had this year in our half-day pre-K program, which was at 9 students, and we were not able to support 2 sessions at Washburn. So we will be we're planning to transfer our pre-K over to Washburn School. With that also eliminates the need for our 0.5 pre-K teacher, so we'll be reducing that position at East Auburn. We would also not be hiring for the special ed tech position that was not filled for this year. So that would be the elimination of 1 full-time special ed tech, and also 0.5 pre-K and 0.5 special ed, which we do have this year, of course, attached to the pre-K program, and also supporting special ed for the remainder of the day. So those are the changes that we're anticipating at East Auburn.
Thanks, Michelle. Next up is Fairview Elementary.
Good evening. So at Fairview, currently our enrollment is 480 as of today. However, some of those are out of district, so we're working with students in the building at, would be 473 students. So when I projected for next year, I am looking at that same number. That would give us a class ratio of 1 to 18, and just for this year, it's about 1 to 17, so it would just be slightly higher. We with a low of 14 in kindergarten and then a high of 21 in 6th grade. That would mean we would be reducing at Fairview. We have a retirement that we would not be filling. We have currently a vacant 6th grade that we did not fill this year. And then we have one ed tech position that is currently vacant that we would not be filling.
Okay, thank you. Sure.
The vacant 6th grade, is that a teacher, ed tech? What is that?
It's a teaching position, so it was moved to the middle school to help them out at the beginning of the year. So when we started, we originally were going to start with 4. We've operated with 3 for the entire year, so it's really not a change for us for next year. Yep.
Thanks, Celeste. So Park Avenue.
Thank you. At Park Avenue, I currently, for the 2022-23 school year, our enrollment in October was around 315. Our projected enrollment is off of our current enrollment. Right now, we're roughly close to it. We're projecting 333. Currently enrolled, we have 338 students as of right now. Presently, we have 19 classroom teachers. And for our enrollment for next year, we'll be looking at 18 classroom teachers, which would put our average class size around 1 to 19. Our smallest classes would be around 14, and our highest would be in 6th grade at 1 to 25. And of our enrolled student population currently right now, of our 338 current students, or 335 currently till Monday, we have 122 students who are identified as English language learners. 16 of our students are in monitor status, and that's based on their access test scores that we've talked about previously. The current ELL caseload receiving services is 106 students. We have 5 English language teachers supporting those services with an average caseload around 22. And our staffing changes for next year would be a reduction of 2 classroom teacher positions, which will be both vacant positions, and a reduction of 1 vacant ed tech position.
Thanks, Stephanie. Sherwood Heights?
Good evening. As of October 1st, 2022, Sherwood Heights had an enrollment of 314 students. Our class sizes ranged from a low of 13 in one of our pre-K classes to a high of 21 in one of our grade 6 classes. We had 17 regular classroom teachers plus 1 vacant position at kindergarten, and the average number of students per class across the school was 18. Our projected enrollment for 2023-24 is 301 students. The average class size is anticipated to be 18 students, with a low of 12 students per class in kindergarten and a high of 21 students in grade 2. So overall, Sherwood Heights will need 16 regular classroom teachers next year. That results in a reduction of 2 teachers for our school for next year. This will impact a kindergarten position, which is currently vacant, and a 1st grade position, which will be balanced by a staff retirement at kindergarten. So we'll be shuffling some staff around.
Okay, thank you. Mike Walton?
Hello, everyone. So here you see this year's enrollment and staffing, and you'll notice our school enrollment's around 183. That's based on the file 10-1. And our average class size is 1 to 14, which is a really nice number. Please note the class sizes varied from a low of 8 in first grade to 23 in fifth grade. So fifth grade and sixth grade are a little higher because of this year we relinquished 2 positions to the middle school for some staffing needs there. If we look into next year, you will notice here we are reducing 4 classroom positions, 2 of which were vacant and shared with the middle school this year, and then so that will be 2 additional classroom teacher positions that we will reduce based on enrollment and the low numbers in kindergarten and first grade for this year, bringing our average class size to 18. And we anticipate the enrollment to be similar for next year. And one other position that we would be also reducing will be an Ed Tech 3 position that was used previously for behavior support, but that has been vacant as well this year.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Washburn.
Hello, everyone. For Washburn Elementary School, as of October 1st, 2022, we had an enrollment of 243 students at Washburn. Our first grade had 1 to 13 teacher to student ratio. Our sixth grade classes had a 1 to 20 ratio, averaged about a 1 to 16 teacher to student ratio for this current year. Next year, we're looking at an enrollment of approximately 223. When we look at possible ratios in kindergarten, it could be as low as 1 to 10, it could be more, but also going to grade 2 with a 1 to 20 ratio. Okay. Looking at a reduction of 1 classroom teacher position, some of the initiatives that we've had, continuing with the literacy curriculum, the math curriculum, but also our PBIS, or positive behavioral interventions and supports, and restorative practices, which will also continue next year as well.
Thanks, Eric.
Your classroom teacher, is that a vacant position, or is that a position that will be cut?
That's to be determined. That's going to be one that it's not a vacant position, but okay.
Okay, Ben, Auburn Middle School.
Hi there. So current staffing this year, student numbers this year, we have 494 students at the middle school. We have our largest class size is of 26, and our lowest class size is of 21. And next year, we're looking at possible enrollment of 480 students, which is a decrease. Our high class size next year looks like 21, and our low class size next year looks like 18. For ELL, so total number of identified students was 42. We have 7 students in monitor status. Our current caseload in the class is 35 students for ELL. We have 1 teacher with a caseload of 35 students. So we're reducing our staff by 1 ed tech, which is currently unfilled, as well as 1 interventionist, which is currently unfilled.
Thanks, Ben. Franklin?
So our projected enrollments are always based upon our policy at the alternative level of a 15-to-1 student-to-teacher ratio. So we anticipate maxing that out. As you can see from the earlier slides, between 19 and 20, where we had an enrollment of record of 61 students, to our current enrollment today is 103 students, with our maximum capacity at 105. So really, we are at our maximum capacity as far as meeting all of the class needs for students to meet graduation requirements. And again, that's our enrollment piece. This is what we actually have currently enrolled. There's been a little bit of movement on this because our enrollment literally changes by the day. But we are currently at our capacity at 104 students. We have currently 8 students on the wait list who will likely remain there until next year when we have some spots open up due to graduation. The other good piece to that, it's bittersweet to be full because then you are having students that you have to turn away. But we do have a large graduating class, which will not only open up more spots in general, but will open up some more spots to some of the practice that we've been doing to take earlier enrollments, trying to get those interventions started earlier. So the other piece that has continued to go up is our tuition students that come into the Auburn School Department as Lewiston tuition students. We are currently at 15. 3 of our students on the wait list are also potential tuition students. We don't anticipate any staffing changes at this time.
Thanks, Melissa. Scott?
Good evening. My apologies on the cookies. I'll do better. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to be able to share some of the information of the numbers and the enrollment and the things that are taking place last year and projecting for next year. What you have before you is the enrollments since 2021 of grades 9, 10, 11, and 12. And as you can see, we were at 933, moved to 956, 937 at the moment, and that is fluctuating from day to day, much like what Melissa shared with you, people moving and people coming in, and that's always a good thing. And the numbers based on projecting for next year are the 256 are what are currently sitting in the 8th grade at the middle school, and then we just carry the other numbers with us along. What I would share in terms of MPA classification, this kind of keeps us solidly as either A or AA and keeps us in that top 10 category of enrollments through that. The second slide is a breakdown of the number of teachers in each academic area. They stayed pretty stable, but there's 2 areas that I do want to highlight. One is in aspirations and the other one is in health and phys ed. Those numbers each go down by 1. In aspirations, we have a career development position that we haven't been able to fill and is a vacancy. And the other one in health and phys ed goes down by 1, and that is a retirement. And we spent a lot of time considering, is that appropriate or not? And with the new building coming on, with 2 gyms, a new fitness center, as well as the new track and sports field, the stadium, it made it all very quite manageable, and both of these were in conversations with the departments of what can be sustained. The next slide reflects the academic department's average class sizes, and so what I would highlight would be at the bottom. You can see some trends of moving up in some areas, some stay pretty stable, but we move from an overall class size of 12.25 to 12.31. So it ticks up a bit in projection of where we are this year versus where we were last year. It's kind of hard for us to be able to nail into class size averages for next year because we have to wait until we get some enrollments into those classes. With currently carrying 70 teachers, even at 68, so what I wanted to highlight is that we offer at least 200 courses without calculating the LRTC numbers. So just to have a sense of perspective. And that's just a rough average. If you consider that teachers teach at least 3 distinct areas, and at 70, that puts you at 210. So at the very conservative side, over 200 classes offered there. The next slide is the ELHS Ed Techs, and what I do want to share, there is a typo there. The ELL Ed Tech 2 is not a 3. We went from a 3 to a 1. We had a vacant position, and then we packaged a vacant position into creating the ELL teaching position that you approved last fall. But the rest of our special ed techs 2 and 3, as well as our ELL Ed Tech 1, those are gold and worth every penny. The other breakdown, all the numbers stay very stable in our support staff between nurse, librarian, counselor, our JMG specialists. You had that presentation to you last fall. Those accounted for those 2 specialists that one offers program and the other is a dropout prevention. Our school resource officer, we have Officer Matthew back in the building. We put him to work right away yesterday. He was already running through his paces. Our ELPM teacher and ed tech, those numbers stay the same. And the substance misuse counselor, is this still on? Am I still working? Good. Has been a vacant position for quite some time. And we have partnered with New Beginnings, and I just met with Sasha this evening. We were fortunate to be in the building at the same time. We are working with New Beginnings in terms of having access to a substance misuse counselor. We're still working out what exactly that referral process would be for that to happen. And our social workers, we're still holding strong at 3. We have a very talented group of 3 that work with us. 2 from Spurwink and 1 from St. Mary's. Similar to some information that you heard from Park Ave, I just wanted to highlight some of the ELL data that we have in the building. We have 71 identified ELL students, grades 9 through 12. 11 of them are either in the monitor status or exited. Our current ELL caseload is about 60, with 3 teachers and 1 ed tech for an average caseload of 20. We continue to have conversations about their programming so that we're balancing all the needs, because their needs are developed based on their performance on their access testing. They've just completed their access testing, so that those results will help impact how we set up programming for next fall with that staff.
Can I ask a question? Could you define what monitor status means and this access?
Yeah, it has to do with where they scored and if they've performed well enough that it's not just a clean exit. Like you've met the state criteria of not needing ELL services, but it's not like you're exited. It's to monitor. It's to offer check-in support as need be through that transition process after having hit the state benchmark of not qualifying.
And is the access test how that is
Determined? Yes.
determined? Yeah.
Scott. Real quick question. If you, yeah, right there, please. Thank you. I have a trend analysis on ELL student access to for the middle school. What's our trend in numbers been like for the past 4 or 5? Up, how much percentage rough? Or
well, it was enough for us that we had a strong influx last year that we were tracking somewhere in March. I don't want to be the one to speak to those numbers. That's stronger coming from Melissa Hodgkins, but it was enough for us to say we have something that we need to address. And so we looked at it from a staffing perspective, and not just numbers, but the overall needs, whether they were newcomers or they were at a different level of service that they needed right away. So it really put quite a strain, and so that's what led us to looking at a vacant half position in special ed and 2 vacant ed tech positions to try to package together to get that other staff member. But the trend has been up for us. As I said earlier, we offer at conservatively 200 courses. These are some that you've seen before, our dual enrollment, our courses offered with Thomas College on-site courses, our Bridge Year program, and our AP classes. There's 2 areas that I wanted to highlight and share with you. They are at the bottom, the advanced placement program. Right now, we are projecting and making arrangements and plans for an AP human geography, which would be something that we hadn't offered before. And the last one is this afternoon, we had a really strong conversation with our Spring Ahead program. We have 6 students that are participating at Central Maine Community College that had kicked off this semester, and it's one that we're continuing to make plans on to grow. And so there's not a whole lot new. This just highlights some of the courses that we had, but I really wanted to be sure to bring your attention to those two areas. The secretarial staff, that all stays as stable as it has been. What I would highlight is that there's 2 half-time positions. That reflects that a person spends half their time in the main office and the other half time down in the athletic office. It's one person. So our day custodian stays stable at 1, and our nighttime custodian staff, we currently have 3 with contracting with Allstate. With the new building coming on, we have asked for 3 additional new nighttime custodians to help the building as a square footage, virtually just under doubling the actual square footage in size. So it's a pretty significant need there. Chris Piercy and Brittany have been able to provide that with the new kitchen equipment and staff, that number could stay stable. Which brings me to where are our reductions. The curriculum instruction specialist, that was a position that we had developed last year that we really felt that we needed, particularly as we started to look at our overall curriculum, our overall instruction, as we were looking at a review process this year, laying the groundwork for in preparation for our accreditation with NEASC. But actually, it was a process that needed to have been done and had been on the back burner for quite some time. That position, the person who was going to take that position now has an assistant principal position, and so that position stayed open, and we've been able to manage those needs with all of our staffing, with the admin and guidance, and with the great hand and help and support of Dr. Doris. Substance misuse counselor, the career development teacher, as I said, that's been a vacant position throughout the year, and the retirement of the phys ed teacher. So those are the 4 reductions that we would put on the table.
So that concludes Cost Center 1, and a week from tonight, Laura will begin with Cost Center 2. I would be happy to entertain questions from the school committee at this point.
Any questions for Dr. Brown at this point? Questions, comments? Sorry? About 5. You want to take 5 minutes to recess? Is that what you're asking for? Yeah, sure. You want to make a motion for a 5-minute recess? Go right ahead.
I'd like to make a motion for a 5-minute recess.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Sure. 5-minute recess, ladies and gentlemen. wanted to wave our clap. All right, welcome back, everyone. We took a 5-minute recess. So at this point, school committee members, I'm going to open it up to questions that school committee members may have regarding the budget presentation we just had. So anyone have any questions they would like to ask? Mr. Mayor, go ahead. Yep.
First, any positions that are currently filled, that are going to be filled in this budget, were any of those positions paid for with URSA funds, not ARPA funds, but URSA funds, and those funds are exhausted and that gets shifted to the local tax base? That's question one.
So just to make sure that I understood your question, you're asking if we have moved any positions from ESSER into the operating budget for 23-24?
Correct.
Mark, I think the answer is no. So the answer is no.
That's awesome. Okay, second question. Can we get financial projections on what an increased student population count would look like to the budget based upon existing staff and facilities, up to the point of diminishing returns? So in other words, what is your current carrying cost considering your staffing and facilities projected for next year? I'll give you one example. If Washburn has 200 kids, but they could absorb another 50 kids without hiring anybody else, peppered through pre-K through 6, what does that do to our operating budget and hence the tax levy?
I want to make sure I understand what you're asking. It would be, if I understood correctly, you're asking how many more students could we absorb with current levels of staffing?
And more importantly, what would that do to the levy? Because each student comes with, obviously, a state revenue total, but you already have fixed capital costs, your facility, electricity, no additional teachers and so forth. Anything that you would have to hire for or spend more money on either people or facilities, at that point, that would be your point of diminishing returns.
That would become a policy question for the school committee because it would relate directly to class size. And the committee would need to determine what those class sizes would be. So for example, you heard the administrators talk about the average class size is 18 to 21. If the school committee said we will push those class sizes to a higher number and not increase staffing, I would need to know what those numbers are before I can do that exercise.
And maybe I missed this, but I do not know what the policy from the school committee is on maximum, or what the student to teacher ratio maximum is.
Dr. Doris, I don't think we have maximums in policy right now.
So a hypothetical best practice on student to teacher ratio, if we do not have a set policy, can we just hypothetically look at that? I.e., is it 1 to 18 and K through 6?
We can get some data for you on that.
And I don't think this is, and Chair, I'll leave this up to you. I don't think this necessitates a change in policy. What it does is it provides us with more information. And especially if we do not have a policy on student-teacher ratios, what would that look like? Because in any type of private business, your capacity, your handling costs are basically diluted amongst more pupils in this case. So I think it would be a good exercise to see what, not just we could handle from a physical standpoint, but on a per classroom basis, per teacher.
Right, and your last question?
Did I say 3?
You did. Mm-hmm.
Really? I'll give you 3. I'll save some more for later. Recruitment efforts and trend in homeschool student population, and our students that are going out of district to either public or private. Is that cohort growing? In other words, are we losing an ever-increasing number of kids to homeschool or private? Whether we like it or not, we're in competition, and we have to figure out how to regain those students back into our system.
I can provide the homeschool numbers readily. I am not able to provide the numbers of families who don't send their children to the Auburn School Department and may send them to, say, St. Dom's, because they don't notify us of that. Is that correct, Mr. Robinson, that we wouldn't necessarily know that those students are going to a private placement? Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions from school committee members? Clarissa?
Hi. I was just wanted to have a clarification on with the closing of Lake Street and the presentation. I thought I understood that the moving the kids, the middle school kids to the middle school would mean more opportunities for the middle school kids at the middle school, and that I'm just wondering if the staffing is sufficient for that. Will
Ben,
be
you
sufficient
want to
for
answer that question, please?
Yes. Yeah, there'd be more availability to have them with their peers, more availability to have them spend more time, with their regular ed peers.
So Ben, her question pertained to staffing.
Staffing.
Oh, staffing.
Would
Yes.
staffing be sufficient moving them, sorry, Dr. Brown, moving
Yes.
them from Lake Street School over to AMS? Because we didn't hear, and correct me if I'm wrong, Clarissa, but we didn't hear an increase in staffing to accommodate those kids.
And I guess I didn't know if the interventionist is the kind of person that would work on that, but I saw that one of those positions was the interventionist, so that's what partly made me think of that.
Yes, I'm going to look at Laura here.
Yeah, the staff that are in the middle school, part of the staff that are at RATC right now will move over with the students. So there is an open position, teaching position right now that's still in the budget. So obviously we're hoping to fill that, but other staff would be moving over, so it would be fine.
Mark?
Social worker.
Yeah. We were planning on providing some additional information on that staffing transition next week when we do Article 2, so there'll be another chance to talk about that.
Yep. All right, any other questions? Okay, Pat?
I don't know if it's a question or concern, it's for Scott. The aspirations teacher at the high school, what will be the impact on the classes for the kids? I thought that was, fill me in on that, but.
The career aspirations position, so that position became vacant, and we were not able to hire anybody. So we sustained that through the first semester with a long-term sub. And those students that were enrolled for the second semester, we've dispersed to other electives or into learning labs. And so the next step for us in that process is to determine in the state graduation requirements, that no longer is part of the graduation requirement. So that's something that we're going to need to either discuss of removing from our graduation policy or looking through other avenues that we can offer to meet the requirement of having a career development experience for that graduation requirement. So there's a couple strands that we can explore. We've started to have some conversation about that. Is that some work that can happen through guidance? Is that some work that can happen through Flex and Mentor? Is that something else that can be, that we already provide that can be happening there? Quite often, some of our students who haven't been successful in the career development course are become enrolled in the JMG program. We allow for that credit. So it's an examination of all of those, right down to should we have a conversation to amend our graduation policy to keep in line with the state that doesn't require that in their graduation requirements.
Thank you. Before you go, can you explain what the aspiration program does? Like, what is its purpose?
Yeah, well, it's a department that historically, from way back when, was probably the programs that you would have seen at the high school that were the vocational ones that we offered, whether it was mechanics, it currently continues to have our graphics program, would have had wood shop, those kinds of things. So when those programs transitioned out of local high schools, and ours being one of them, over to the regional technical centers, some of those courses that stayed behind, our current culinary, our current graphics, our business management, child development, creative living, those courses stayed, and they're kind of the building block and elective to transition a kid into the LRTC program, or maybe they're just a pure elective that a student has an interest in. So that's what encapsulates the aspirations department, and it's to fulfill some life experiences that are a little different than offering an English class or an elective in social studies class. it has a bit more of relevance for some students, not every student, but for some students in some of their interests. And quite often it can be a springboard into an enrollment into an LRTC program.
So with the new high school having, we're broadening that aspect of education, are we not going to need that? Like right now, the way the new high school is, we're going to have a fire program, we're going to have, hairdressing, we're going to have culinary. Are we going to need an aspiration person for that?
Well, those programs are 2-year programs, and those are kids that are making that commitment their junior and senior year. The best example I can give is our culinary program. Not every kid that we have that enrolls in our culinary program is aspiring to get into the culinary program with LRTC. Many of them really just want an experience with cooking because they grew up cooking with a family member, grandma or just want to learn some skills before they go out on their own. So those programs still have some type of value. Historically, they have been a springboard to exploring into the LRTC type programs. We have been having conversations with LRTC about some level of pathway development and some type of springboard offerings that are a bit more generalized, quite similar to a career development experience. We're not there yet. They have a model. We're still looking at what staffing and space allocations are available for that. But again, those aspiration courses do have a great deal of value because some kids may take the child development class because they want to pursue babysitting. They're really, the early childhood development program is really kind of a springboard for a student who's looking to explore and to get into a career in education. Very similar to our graphics program. They want an experience. They want to develop some of their graphic skills. They want to get into the printing world. They may not necessarily want to be involved in pursuing graphics at the next level because it's something that they want to pursue after high school. For some students, it's another addition to some of their art portfolio work, or it's something that they have of interest. The neat part about graphics is that they can use that to make products that we can use for presentations for any class. So it really gives them an opportunity to learn some skills that either can springboard into something else or they can use it as they desire.
So losing this position, would that jeopardize those classes that you were just talking about, I guess?
Those classes would stay. The career development course was really, it was a 9th grade introductory course to start to get them to understand what are some of their interests, what are some of the pathways, what are some of the courses that they have available that come before them, what are some of the skills that you need to be successful in high school, what are some of those skills that you may think you want to do, and continue that into the rest of high school and beyond, whether that's the workforce, the military, or looking at a 2 or 4 year college or a certification program. So it's really, it's a 50,000 foot overview of here are some things that you may experience later in life, and this is how you could set yourself up by taking some of those courses in high school, which has led us to have a conversation of, do we necessarily need to have a course to do that? Those are important skills. I don't think anyone wants to dismiss that. But are there other ways to do that? So it's been a requirement. So are there other ways that we can create those offerings for kids so they're not tied to a course to do that?
I have one more question about the high school. Right now, ELHS, yes, we have a cafeteria, but not really. Like, it's not like we make a lot of food there. And I'm not trying to disparage that. It's just what it is. But the new high school, we will be having a true cafeteria and a true kitchen and food being made. Are we going to have enough staff to staff that with 5?
That would be the question for Chris. He's been monitoring and managing this all along. He's the one that is the person that, from what I'm understanding, everybody is short-staffed all across the district in terms of kitchen help and support. And so I leave that into his wheelhouse. I haven't been given any indication that we would need X many more staffing to do that. He's has a good understanding of the layout and what's going to be the equipment in there. So I kind of leave that into his ballpark. I haven't been given any indication that we would need to change that. And from my understanding, our food service program is pretty self-sustaining, so that follows that model.
Yeah, if I could add to that too, I think food services is viewed as a profit center insofar as you can expand that program if your revenues are supporting it. So if we find that we have more students coming through and utilizing food services, we don't have an annual process we have to wait for to hire additional staff. We can hire them in real time because the revenues are there to support that staffing. So we'll see how it goes and adjust as we need to.
And they make great cookies. Friday is cookie day. 2 for $1 chocolate chip cookies. They're
Well,
awesome.
those would be good
So
to
you
bring
could-
next
yeah,
time.
Right? Scott, I cannot believe you even just said that as we're sitting here with these things here.
We want those cookies.
Anyways, yeah. Any other
see
questions?
what I
from-
can do.
Yeah, any other questions from school committee members? Sure, yeah, just use your mic, please.
It's a question about this cost center. I'm just confused at the end of the, when it says the positions eliminated, there's that section marked as TBD. What are those? So there's vacant, retirement.
So we have several positions that are going to be impacted by a RIF. And the TBD will be to be determined because it may be, for example, if it's in an elementary school, that RIF may be a person in a different building because they have less seniority than the person that's being reduced in another building.
That makes sense?
So it's just, so even though it's listed as a specific location, it could be other places?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, any other questions for school, from school committee members? All right, seeing none, thank you all for presenting this evening. We appreciate all the work. I know the thousands of hours that go into this presentation and compiling a budget. All right, moving on. I don't believe we have any student rep reports this evening. Superintendent's report is pretty much filed into the budget presentation. No chairperson's report. Mr. Mayor, do you have a city council update you'd like to give?
Yeah, a couple things. And I wasn't here the last meeting, but the city council, I gave my state of the city address. I just want to make sure everybody knows that from a city council standpoint, and there is a third way to help shrink this deficit, and that's to increase taxable value. In other words, you have more that you can tax. And that's something that the city council has been working on really aggressively now for a couple of years. It's not an overnight fix, but I'll give you one example. The $1.1 million we are short from the state on revenue share for education could be made up locally with 150 single-family market rate homes. That tax equivalent would make up that deficit. Census data is showing that we only have about 0.3 kids for every family. And Auburn is, well, a young city compared to the rest of Maine. It is very old compared to the rest of the country. So we do need, and through policy, and we're talking about is how do we attract more young families, more kids, hence why that data point that I requested is extremely important so we can help with future planning on what our carrying capacities are for the schools. And what does that do for long-term taxes? I don't think we'll do anything, and I don't think anybody's under the assumption that it will do anything for this tax or budget season, but we'd be remiss by not looking at just like you do, the following years. So this is a long-term play. So the city council is looking at that. We're working at that. I would encourage the school committee especially, as well as all staff and parents, to continue to increase growth as a way to help increase that taxable value so we don't have to raise taxes or cut essential services, and education is one of those. So that's the city report. Oh, and Lobster Festival, May is for Mainers, May 6th.
All right,
Thanks, Karen.
Thank you, absolutely. Committee reports, I'm not sure that any committees have met. There's nothing, no agendas, or they've just met. So there's nothing attached to the agenda simply because the meetings haven't happened, or there's nothing yet to report out. I will report out, though, as far as the building committee goes, on February 27th, we did have a public meeting at the Edward Little Gym for the new Edward Little High School. Ran a straw poll vote to accept state monies for the removal and the abatement of the PCBs at Edward Little. And the straw poll vote was 49-0 in favor of accepting state monies. So now it will continue along its journey to the next part. So I believe it was 49-0, none opposed. So everyone who showed up voted in favor of accepting state monies with no impact to Auburn taxpayers. So we have, that's building committee update. Old business, nothing under old business. And we're going to move on to some new business. Can I entertain a motion to approve final design and funding approval for the new Edward Little High School for a first reading?
So
Motion,
moved.
please.
Second.
I didn't hear first. Was that you, Pam? Okay, first. Pat, I think I heard you for second. All right, questions, comments on that one? Sorry. What was that? I'm used to Brian coming out of the gate first. All right, no questions, comments. I'll take a vote. All those in favor? Motion passes. Thank you. Next is a motion to approve the 23-24 Auburn School Department calendar for first reading. Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Oh my goodness, you guys. Thank you. Everyone's gun shy.
Second.
Thank you, Pam. All right, questions, comments on that one? Brian?
Yeah, question. I got a, and it might be a question for Scott as well. From one of the staff at EL around, I guess it was a few years ago, the workshop day around Martin Luther King Jr. Day was on a Tuesday. We've moved it to the prior Friday. And one of the impacts that this person had notified me of was the Midnight Marathon that usually happens on MLK Day, which is the basketball games, the rollerdrome, the just-in-time bowling. This year they had to cancel it because they also had exams the next day. So it was just one of those things that he had asked us to take into consideration. I'm not sure. I was going to go back and look and see how many calendars ago where we moved it to the Friday. But it's that workshop day that right now in the current calendar, it's a Friday. Martin Luther King Jr. Day is Monday. But
So
I'm just curious.
Yeah. If you wouldn't mind, Mr. Belknap, Scott, would you come up to the podium and talk about why that decision was made not to put the workshop day there?
Yeah, I think one of the pieces that needs to be highlighted is that our calendar can't be any more than 4 days different than our regional calendar, and so that's a big consideration. It was just as COVID had hit was I think the last time that March that we had the March Madness, which fell not that we had the Martin Luther King holiday with the workshop day after that. I really couldn't tell you what the thinking was of having that workshop day after that. It typically, that time frame is when finals are happening. It's either the week before, the week after. I try to split the semester right down the middle, so wherever that start date is, and some of that gets impacted by the Christmas break. And so it's a variance of the calendar. It's always been quite a challenge to have a shortened week of a holiday on a Monday and a workshop on a Tuesday. I think the path has been when the calendar gets developed for the area and not having those 4 days difference. It was an anomaly of the calendar that allowed for that Tuesday. This year, when we were looking at that, what makes that possible for the rollerdrome and for the bowling is that those are off nights for them. So it may mean that we can still do March Madness, but we may need to be looking at a different night because part of that is scheduling basketball games. And I think there is some flexibility to be able to do that, but we may need to look at having some other offerings that aren't just those two. Maybe there's something that can be worked out with both of those venues, but can we look at some other possibilities, whether it's Norway Savings Bank, it's Ingersoll, it's the movie theater, or just some ideas? Are there other things that we can do so we can continue to have a March Madness event? But packaging it up around Martin Luther King really does put the finals preparation and delivery of those exams during that week in quite a tight spot. And for me, it just didn't feel good for me to come forth and say, I think we should have that workshop day simply because of March Madness, because it has an impact on the rest of the district. And I didn't feel good about running a March Madness with finals exam happening the very next day. We all would get phone calls. Why was our kid out until midnight and they have an English exam the next morning?
Right.
Can I just ask, why is March Madness in January?
Midnight Madness, sorry, Midnight Madness. March Madness actually starts next week for us. It's a winter carnival kind of week, so my apologies. It's Midnight Madness. Yes. Sorry. And it really is a very positive event. And again, typically what happens is it's a day that we have some home basketball games, and they do a lot of activities through that. We try to draw many students who may not normally attend a basketball game, have a lot of fun activities to draw them in, and then from there, they go to these different activities throughout the community. And the community, those two partners have been just phenomenal and have done an incredible job, but it lines up well for them because those would be off nights. And I totally recognize and get that maybe a Thursday or Friday night may not work best for them because they are a business. So then that leads us, are there some other things that we could be doing to repackage Midnight Madness?
Thank you.
Perfect, thanks. Yeah, thanks for the explanation.
Any other questions or comments about the calendar, Pat?
On the, where it says quarters and semester ends, why does the second quarter end January 26th and the semester end January 19th?
Peter, do you want to respond to Pat? I think that was an error in the calendar with Power School. They should be the same date. Is that correct? Yes, so that's something we would need to correct.
Yeah, from my end, I'm going to count up the number of days, split the year in half, and try to manage that within a day or two of that week. We as department heads have talked about, do we start it and keep one of those days in the middle in terms of preparation? The last few years, we've kept them coming out so that it was straight days. So I try to, for me, when I set the semester time, try to split that halfway point.
Any other questions or comments? All right, seeing none, I'll take a vote. All those in favor of the 23-24 Auburn School Department calendar? Any opposed? One opposed and no one abstaining. All right, one opposed. Upcoming meetings. At the end of tonight's meeting, we have upcoming meetings listed pretty much in March. We will be spending lots and lots and lots of time together, school committee members. Any requests for future agenda items? Requests for information? Seeing none, take a motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Thank you, Brian, for a second. All those in favor? Motion passes. We are adjourned, ladies and gentlemen, 7:15 p.m. Thank you.